What took them so long to call for help? They knew they were in trouble.
Her husband lost his life in a Central Valley aqueduct. Tonight, the ABC 7 News I-Team gets answers to questions that she's been asking for nearly a year.
It took state officials almost 12 months to release their report on the deaths of 2 divers last February at a pumping station along the California aqueduct. And they still didn't find the cause of the accident. But the ABC 7 News I-Team has also been investigating, and Dan Noyes is here now with some answers for us.
Well, Dan and Carolyn, it was a surprise when I saw the final report. The state concludes we may never know exactly what led to the death of the divers, but a review of the evidence and interviews with people who were there that day show what went wrong. 44-year-old Martin Alvarado was excited about his new position as a diver with the State Department of Water Resources. Dangerous work, but it paid an extra $9 an hour on top of his salary as maintenance worker. And that would come in handy with his 7 children.
Every time he did it, he liked it. He would come home like, "This is fun, babe. Look, this is what I did today." And he liked it. I couldn't tell him not to do it.
One of his first assignments as a diver, checked the Dos Amigos pumping plant for tiny mussels that can clog the system with his partner, veteran diver Tim Crawford. The plant is a crucial part of the California aqueduct. Each of the 6 massive pumps can send the equivalent of 2 Olympic-sized pools up a steep hill each minute. Imagine the force of all this water doubled, rushing through a single pipe in just 60 seconds.
They went down and they didn't come back up, and we just don't know what transpired down there underneath that caused this accident to happen.
Several state investigations did not pinpoint the cause of the accident, but there is a lot of evidence of what went wrong. Mistake number 1. The plant managers broke the state's dive policy that says diving is prohibited wherever there is the possibility the divers may inadvertently enter an area of excessive velocity. During the dive, pump number 5, with its powerful suction, stayed on. In fact, over the years, the managers regularly failed to turn off the pumps when divers were in the water.
He was telling me that they dove with the pumps on.
Martin Alvarado's close friend and co-worker, Luis Sanchez, tried to warn him just 1 week before his death.
And I go, "That's absolutely nuts. That's crazy." I go, "People are going to get sucked in there." I go, "Don't do it, Martin. You can refuse to do it."
Why wasn't the pump shut down before the divers got in the water?
It was just our normal schedule.
The man overseeing the plant tells us their dive policy didn't specifically say the pump should be off during a dive. He says that will be the policy in the future. Mistake number 2, the dive tender. The man who was supposed to keep track of the divers and respond to an emergency had no training, and he had no experience as a diver, both violations of state rules. The dive tender, Mark Medeiros, declined to be interviewed for this report. But using the California Public Records Act, the I-Team obtained a recording of his interview with state safety inspectors.
At that point there, I asked Tim, I says, "Hey, how long are you guys going to be down for?" And he says, "Should be about 30 minutes.
Records show the divers entered the water at 10:10 that morning with about 30 minutes of air in their tanks. Medeiros watches their air bubbles as they inspect the trash racks in front of pump 1 and move down the line.
I proceeded right above them, and, I could see where they were with the bubbles that were coming up.
About 10 minutes into the dive, Medeiros watches the divers' air bubbles sweep into pump 5 and disappear. He doesn't call the senior plant operator until 10:45. By this point, the diver's air supply is running out. Mistake number 3. The safety officer at the plant, Bill Collins, is one of the most experienced divers in the state. He was supposed to take part in the dive that day, but dropped out at the last minute. And once the divers were in trouble, he was very hard to reach. 10:55, the senior plant operator calls the safety officer, Bill Collins. He doesn't answer his cell phone. 11:19, Collins finally returns the call and says he'll drive to the plant. He doesn't order the pump shut down. Why not turn off that pump right away?
Well, that's a question. That was probably one of our procedures that we weren't clear on.
It takes 20 minutes for Safety Officer Collins to arrive on scene. He also spoke with state inspectors.
I didn't see no bubbles as well, and I told him something's wrong.
Collins prepares to dive to look for the 2 men, but he's missing a key piece of equipment.
One of the divers had my weight belt, so I couldn't get in the water immediately.
Collins calls for a spare, but it would take quite some time. At 11:46, Division Chief Jim Thomas arrives. He finally orders the workers to shut down Pump 5 and call 911. 911 call wasn't called for an hour and a half after the first sign of trouble.
And that was probably the weakness in our emergency procedure of everybody being clear as to what the procedure was to do and to call 911.
At 12:26, more than 2 hours after the first signs of trouble, a spare weight belt arrived so Collins can make his dive. He recovers the bodies of the two divers. The autopsy shows they both died of asphyxia. They drowned, waiting for help.
There was a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes caused, 2 lives, one of them being my brother.
It's all very difficult for Martin Alvarado's family, but they want to know the truth. Mistake number 4, the weeds. After the divers' deaths, investigators sent down a remote-controlled camera and found a mat of weeds and other debris covering the grates in front of Pump 5. That same massive amount of water was being funneled into a few small openings, so the force of the current right at the bars was much greater, holding the divers down. State investigators concluded the high velocities likely pinned them to the trash rack, where they either exhausted their air supply or their regulators were pulled from their mouths. The machine that's supposed to clear the weeds and debris from the grates hasn't worked for years.
They were not ready for something to go wrong. I think that's indisputable.
Cal OSHA fined the plant more than $15,000, issuing several citations, among them failure to have all pumps shut off during dive operations, failure to provide training and instruction to the dive tender, failure to plan emergency procedures for the dive.
What could they do about it? They couldn't pull them up. They couldn't communicate with them. And as you pointed out, it took quite a long time for anybody to get down there to see what actually happened, way after anything could have been done.
Sarah Alvarado accuses managers at the pumping plant of not telling her the real story of how her husband died. Knowing the facts now only gets her so far.
Nothing's going to bring him back. Only he knows what happened. They're going to tell me stories and more stories, and I don't care for him. I don't care for him. I have to be strong for those kids. So I don't really care for whatever they have to tell me.
The dive tender told me by phone it's tough to deal with. They were both personal friends of mine. Officials at the Department of Water Resources are appealing the OSHA fines. They've also halted the dives at the plant until they work out better procedures. I'm posting links to every official report on this case on a new iTeam blog at abc7news.com. Commercial diving is a major industry in the state, and many divers are concerned about what happened, and you can join the conversation at the comment section on my blog. Dan, Carol?
Just a series of mistakes there.
Yeah, just really
tragic.
unfortunate. Yeah. And
right.
preventable.
All right. Thank you, Dan.